Hello, welcome to the last session of this conference. It's great that you still are here, not too tired, obviously. I hope that you won't regret to have come to this discussion about the enlargement of NATO and the EU and the question how long the current momentum will last. I think I won't waste time with long introductions because we have a big panel, and just to introduce very shortly Mikheil Darchiashvili, former Deputy Minister of Defense of Georgia, Klaus Korhonen, who is Ambassador for Policy Planning in the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who has been before the Finnish representative at NATO. So in a very important time when Finland joined the alliance. Next to me, Anja Koch, German journalist with Deutsche Welle. Then Radu Burduša from Moldova, director of the Institute for Euro-Atlantic Institute for Building and Resilience. Julian Kifu, president of the Romanian Center for Conflict Prevention and Early Warning. And last but not least, Dalia Bankauskaite from the Vilnius University. We will do it like it has been in all the other panels, short introductions by the panelists, and then you as the audience will get the floor. The introductions will be sharp 5 minutes, so that you will have still some time for your questions. So, Mr. Darchiashvili, if you would begin.
Yeah, now it's working. Thank you. First of all, it is my real pleasure and honor to be again at the panel hosted by the GFSIS. And as a GFSIS alumni, I want to start by thanking Eka, Alexei, and GFSIS team for putting up this exceptional conference, inviting great minds, initiating great discussions, and over these 2 days we've heard many interesting topics, small part of which, if implemented, we will be able to effectively deter evil Russia and safeguard rule-based international order. In my opening remarks, I would like to focus on upcoming NATO summit. I'll be very brief. I'll share what I expect from the NATO allies and what will be the, in my opinion, 2 major deliverables for the effective deterrence against threats coming from Russia. First and foremost, we expect that we'll hear a reconfirmation of the ironclad Article 5 commitments from the alliance. And we see the NATO's transformation in action full steam. NATO allies are arming themselves. NATO allies are increasing their defense budgets. We can admit that not all allies are there yet, but the trend is really upward looking. We see that NATO regularly improves its operational interoperability, and in fact, as we speak, one of the biggest military drills are being unfolded, Steadfast Partner 2024, involving over 90,000 NATO troops from all the NATO allies. Frankly, the success of the NATO summit will be mostly dependent on the decisions of NATO allies regarding Ukraine. How strong, how bold, how coherent alliance will be in support of Ukraine. And when I mention support of Ukraine, I mean 2 major pillars: to help Ukraine to win the war, and the second one, to ensure the long-term security of Ukraine. I really hope that we'll hear pledge from the NATO allies that alliance will move forward with additional support of defense capabilities to Ukraine. Ukraine that has been steadfastly fighting not only for its sovereignty and territorial integrity, but also for the security of Europe. Ukraine prevents Russia from invading rest of the Europe, and I think the understanding of this should be the prevalent in all the European and Euro-Atlantic capitals. I do hope that the United States House of Representatives will approve the vital package in support of the Ukraine and will continue to stand on the right side of the history in defense of the justice and humanity. Because for the God's sake, it's heartbreaking to see Ukraine that again defends Europe is suffering from the shortage of defense capabilities and has to plead for it repeatedly. I think NATO and the allies and the West in general need to graduate from the policy of we will support Ukraine as long as it takes to the policy and start the new policy. We'll do everything to make sure that Ukraine wins the war. Another pillar will be how to secure the long-term stability and security of the Ukraine, and I think the Washington summit is the best venue for it. Best venue for it because we have the foundational steps already made in Vilnius. Vilnius summit, in fact, delivered very powerful messages that paves the way for accelerated NATO membership of Ukraine. So MAP phase was eliminated. We once again heard reaffirmation that Ukraine will become a NATO member. We've seen a package, substantial package submitted to Ukraine, as well as the NATO-Ukraine Commission was upgraded to the council level. But the fundamental question is that whether this is enough to effectively deter Russia, and the answer obvious, no. I really hope that at the Washington summit, Ukraine will be invited to join NATO and start accession talks. The accession talks, which will not mean immediate membership, rather it will be the kickstart of a very important process that will first and foremost send a very strong and powerful message to Russia and its cronies that the West is serious and committed and believes in Ukraine's victory and is ready to invest whatever is needed to ensure long-term security and stability of Ukraine. Anything less will send a signal that will be definitely interpreted in a wrong way from the Russian Federation. Signal that will leave hesitation, signal that will leave ambiguity, and we all know where these ambiguous statements lead to us. We have very bad experience of 2008, very bad experience of 2014, and bad experience of 2022. Of course, I really expect that NATO will not abandon freedom-loving people of Georgia. And I want to emphasize people of Georgia. Let's make no mistake, Georgia is under the significant threat. So I'm getting notes about the time limits. So I'll stop here. And then during the Q&A session, I hope there will be question what to expect from the summit about Georgia. So I'll be happy to elaborate.
Thank you very much for this good first words, and I think they will be give material for discussions. Now I the word to Mr. Korhonen.
Yes, thank you very much. And at the outset, I want to say that I have learned and benefited a lot also from the previous panels. So I'm very honored and pleased to participate in this concluding discussion. Okay? Yeah. So very happy to participate in this concluding discussion. In the morning, I very much liked the speech of the President of Iceland. It came from the heart. And I think also to these discussions we come with our own national experiences and our own national histories. And if you take my own country, Finland, and our fascinating host country, Georgia, so there are differences between our countries, differences in our history, but there are also similarities. We are both neighbors of Russia, and we have been trying to manage that relationship with Russia in different ways at different times. Now Finland joined the European Union already 29 years ago. and is a fresh member of NATO. We always say that our NATO membership is not against anybody. We have, of course, the right to take care of our own defense. NATO is a defensive alliance, not an aggressor, unlike the current Russia, unfortunately. Really interesting discussion about the agency of countries that are not yet in the European Union and at NATO. We have come a long way from chessboard thinking. I think all these countries are taking us as fully sovereign countries. They deserve full respect. They have rights, but of course comes also responsibilities. But there was also an interesting quote from Nazarbayev saying that if you don't work strategically, so you will not survive. And Finland has worked throughout its history very strong in order to be a player playing the ball and not being the football which is played. It needs constant work. And then just to conclude, a word about actually the question of this panel, which is the perspective of accession for new countries to the European Union and NATO. And it's difficult really to predict very accurately what will happen. There are different scenarios, but I would say that the Russian attack against Ukraine, in a way, has clarified things also for member states of the European Union and NATO. Of course, always these accession processes, they might be difficult, they might be expensive, but we now, clearer than before, we understand there is also a price to pay if we leave countries in a vulnerable position without the support that they need. It might be membership in the European Union and NATO if these countries so decide, and we decide. But anyway, I mean, we can't leave anybody alone. Maybe I stop here.
Thank you very much. Now I give the word to Anja Koch, who will tell us something about the German view on these processes.
Yes, first of all, thanks for having me. As a journalist in Germany, I do cover a lot of German politics, so that's what I will be focusing on in my opening remarks. And looking at the picture, at the question of the panel, how long will the momentum for the enlargement last? I think it's good to maybe have a look back at where we are coming from. I'm talking about the enlargement of the European Union. For a very long time, the European Union looked basically like a closed shop. When Jean-Claude Juncker was the president of the EU Commission, he basically declared that during his time in office, no other country would be joining the European Union. Another example is the French president blocking accession talks with North Macedonia and Albania until the end of 2019. That, of course, has changed quite a bit with Russia's invasion in Ukraine. At least the tone, I think, has changed. If you kind of listen to what Macron says now, last summer during a summit, he said, I wrote the quote down somewhere because I wanted to make sure I quote him correctly. Yes, the question is not whether the European Union will be enlarged, but how an enlargement will be organized. Other countries within the European Union that used to be more skeptical of an enlargement also changed their approach. Now, when we talk about the position of Germany, I think the shift is, you don't see the shift as much because Germany used to, let's say, at least tend to be a supporter of the enlargement of the European Union, but I think the support has become more clearly and it has become louder. To give you an example, our foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, last year said, the heart of Europe beats in Kiev. I'm not sure that a sentence like this, that she would have said that, let's say, a decade ago. What's also remarkable is that there seems to be a consensus within the German coalition government that enlargement is something to be supported. I don't know how close you follow German politics. Our government currently is a so-called traffic light coalition. There are 3 different parties forming one coalition. The relationship between those parties, let's say it's not a natural love affair. They fight over many things. It's sometimes depressing to report about it. But it seems that that all of them do support the enlargement of the European Union. So I guess that's good news for anyone who's in favor of the enlargement. The coalition agreement, for example, commits to letting in the West Balkan countries. The foreign minister has stressed several times that she thinks this has to be faster. I think that there is also a growing understanding in the German government that the integration process has to be faster because if we go on with those accession talks for decades and decades, it leaves the would-be members too frustrated. And the German government has made clear several times that in order to enlarge the European Union also has to undergo reforms. The German Chancellor, for example, supports the idea of having more qualified majority decisions instead of having anonymity. And in case you wonder if all this is going to change next year when we have federal elections, I think I can comfort you. I don't think that things will change dramatically, even if the government changes, because the biggest opposition party, the CDU and CSU, the Conservatives, are also rather in support of enlarging the European Union. And I think a few insecurities come with the election of the Parliament of the European Union, because as we are all aware, there is a rise of the far right in Europe and also in Germany. And I think we'll have to wait and see how strong those forces will actually be in the European Parliament.
Thank you very much. Now with Radu Burdusha, we changed the perspective from inside EU and NATO to outside Moldova, which wants to become member of European Union, and with NATO that's a little bit more complicated. So you have the word.
Thank you, Reinhard. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to be a speaker on this distinguished panel. I will go straight to the title of this panel, and I will say that, in my opinion, the momentum of NATO and EU enlargement will continue. However, I think with varying, intensity, momentum, and a specific period when the new wave will be approved, and this of course will develop will depend a lot on the developments and resolution of the war in Ukraine. Among the primary drivers for the expansion eastward of NATO in the EU, of course, I see the security concerns and the defense of the shared values, but also the fact, the upholding the international rules-based order. At the same time, key obstacles in this expansion include the uncertainty surrounding the outcome of the war in Ukraine, and the geopolitical considerations, such as the potential for conflict escalation or its extension beyond Ukraine. Now, I would like to put this a bit into context and talk a bit about the internal situation in the Republic of Moldova and touch upon several key issues, several threats that we're facing, so you understand how we go, how we're taking this process, how we go about it. So a couple of days ago, the intelligence service of the Republic of Moldova came out with a report, and they basically described several scenarios, actions that threats that Moldova is facing right now. So I will just stop a couple of them that I consider some of the most important and very immediate, with very immediate effect. So first and foremost, it is important to highlight that one of the strategies employed by Russia in Moldova is basically supporting pro-Russian parties, political parties in Moldova. These parties have significant chance of gaining a majority
in 2025 parliamentary elections. I need to say that this is the preferred Russian course of action. Why? Because it's cheaper than the military intervention. So they basically allocate lots of resources to supporting these parties. They funnel money into Moldova, and this strategy they put it to work in last November in 2023 during the local elections, and it was quite successful. Also, they leverage the fugitive oligarchs, Moldovan oligarchs that are abroad right now, but they lead some of the parties from distance, being abroad. The second threat I would like to mention is the intensification of Russian propaganda and disinformation. And besides the common themes and messages that they used to promote, such as the West is degrading, the West is dangerous, and so on, the narrative about the neutrality of Moldova, that Moldova has to stay neutral, and by the way, you need to stay weak and not develop your armed forces. Right now we have a set of new messages that revolve around the theme if you pursue the European integration or getting closer ties to NATO or NATO allies, then you will bring war in Moldova. So basically, these themes, these messages are oriented towards sparking doubt, bringing bringing fear, and by that discouraging and basically by that preventing, stopping the momentum movement for the European integration. Finally, Russia uses the Transnistrian frozen conflict and exploits the tension that exists in Gagauzian autonomous region in Moldova to prevent EU integration. These two entities usually act coordinating their actions between themselves, but also with Moscow. Transnistria lately became very famous in the international media. On 28th of February, they held a sort of gathering of the so-called regional deputies, and basically they came out with a declaration where they asked Putin for support/defense, защита. Of course, we all understand that right now, basically the speculation before this gathering was that they will ask for annexation to Russia. And the speculation was that on the 29th of February, Putin will come out in front of the Federal Assembly in his annual speech and basically will accept Transnistria joining Russian Federation. Of course, everyone understood that this is unrealistic right now because of the current situation on the ground. Nevertheless, they asked for this защита. And I think Russia will exploit this call whenever it considers that is necessary. Also, yesterday, the leader of Gagauzian region, Evgenia Gutsul, met with Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the World Youth Festival in Sochi. The leader of Gagauzia also asked for protection and complained basically about the pressure she's getting from Chisinau. Now, in this context, taking into consideration the current realities, I think I'm closing. I do consider that NATO and EU's further enlargement presents an opportunity, but also a degree of risk. Ultimately, well, Russia never was happy with NATO or any EU enlargement. As such, in order to accept the next wave of enlargement, the most important precondition is for Russia to lose the war in Ukraine. Any other outcome of the war will severely hinder the possibilities of NATO and EU expansion to the east. Thus, the unity of collective West in helping Ukraine is paramount.
Thank you very much, Radu. So now your neighbor, not only on this panel, but also geographically, Julian Kifu from Romania has the word.
Thank you very much. So I would like to point to at least 3 points. One is about the agendas of EU and NATO. Second one about the influence of the war of aggression of Russia on Ukraine. Two, the enlargement process, and for sure some points about the conditions, provisions, you know, for European Euro-Atlantic integration. First, a disclaimer. As you know, Romania is one of the countries supporting enlargement from the beginning. We have a strategic partnership with Republic of Moldova for European integration, and a lot of people on the ground assisting Republic of Moldova to do the reforms and the job of integration. With Ukraine, we are negotiating the strategic agreement of support, and it refers to the G7 resolution, as you know. And at the same time, with Georgia, we are strategic partners and one of the countries that succeed in pushing Georgia, yes, for the Georgians to become candidate country. That being said, I'm going to let the two differences between emotions, perceptions, why not wishful thinking, versus realism, the pragmatic approach, and some calculus, not all of them, some may be cynical. But we have to look at the things as they are and not as we wish them to become. So, that being said, I selected, because of the time frame, just a few very important points of the evolution and of the agenda of both of the organizations. In the case of the EU, the most important problem is to fight extremism and populism. There's an experience related to this, and it leads to a change that the EPP summit, who just ended today, has made to its own program, taking advantage of the fact that they are growing anyway. They are going to pass the 200 deputies as it is in the polls today. And in that respect, they give up a part of the Green Deal to the Greens in order for them to have their own grounds for attracting votes. So it's no longer about green energy and green economy, it's about energy and economy, which means that they should perform, and the competition and the real provisions of economy should be embraced. So actually the EPP is leaving a part of the green to the Greens and moving more to the right, to the liberal market economy oriented approach. The second part is getting rid of some of the points related to the progressism, to the renew, and instead embracing Christian democracy and the conservatory part of it, of the EPP, you know, the traditional original way of development of the EPP has three pillars, one of them being liberal, another one Christian Democrat, and a part of the conservatory in the pro-European sense. Now, that changes the agenda because we do have European elections 6 to 9 of June this year, and the results are going to decide the way that the functions and even the agenda and the priorities are going to be made. In the case of NATO, I will refer just to two of the points. One is the Vilnius summit has been already invoked here. Vilnius summit came, and why? Because after the political decision, we have the enforcement part, the planning, contingency plan, adaptation, and all of this. And DC summit is also about some political point that has to be assumed, and after that entering the process. So for Vilnius, what is important, we all see it, statement, but also in the final declaration, not an inch of the territory should be left out. It's a lesson learned from Ukraine, how difficult it is to regain the territory. So actually, this changes a little bit the defense and deterrence, including the deterrence by denial, to another type of concept, which is forward defense. It means that the new concept and the new planning should take in consideration the fact that if you have a hostile force who arrives and tries to get into your territory, you should approach in some form. Once again, it's just an image in a proactive but also perspective way. So you need to tackle them before they reach your territory. it is a tremendous change. It's going to enter into the planning, into the contingency plans, and this is changing dramatically also the way of looking at the war, not only the lessons learned from Ukraine. What are the main subjects in DC? In DC, actually, there are two main debates. Well, actually, three directions. The first one is putting the high-intensity, long-term, full-scale war as a threat into the political assumptions, and then moving to planning for that possibility, which means the army, people, capabilities, adapted also to the evolution of the only war that we know in the 21st century of this scale, of this magnitude. And third, for sure, doctrines. It comes also with a military industry that has to follow, and who is going to move from defense industry to war industry, which means different level of magnitude and of capacities. The second very important point is a new debate and most probable the acceptance of a global NATO. That's a very important step forward. It is also a way of preparing for a possible new leadership in Washington, D.C., new old leadership, whatever, which means that you have to have a framework where European countries can assist the Americans in the Indo-Pacific in order to offset the presence in that region. And the third point, and I just was in between the points, the third point is important because it's about our wider Black Sea region, which at this point
maybe very briefly now.
I'm very sorry, I have to do the presentation if you allow me. It's about a strategy that has been allowed, and it is important. We are here in Georgia and in the wider Black Sea region to maintain the wider Black Sea region in the forefront of not only Ukraine, but the wider Black Sea region per se, which is a weak point as we have seen. The second part, it is about how the war is inflecting. On one hand, we have the war is a window of opportunity. It happened with the 9/11, and we had the extension with 7 countries. At the same time, the evolution of the war can impede in some points the enlargement and the way it is done and the rhythm. Actually, I won't expect any big breakthrough about enlargement, not in DC, by no way. Maybe the opening of negotiations for Republic of Moldova and Ukraine. Even by the end of the current tenure of the Commission, it is possible at the European Council in June. But once again, I don't want to go in the wishful thinking. Most probable we will have some steps by the end of the current year. And the third point, I'm in a rush. Everything done in the evolution towards Euro-Atlantic enlargement is about individual merits. And in that respect, the assessments of how the points that have been offered to the countries are going to be followed are very strict. As you have seen, the formulations of the 9 points, for instance, for Georgia and the 12 points previously are completely different. Very important, don't make any step back. It's a lesson learned. We learn it the hard way. If you make a step back, credibility of the process and of the country and of the policies and the commitment to go that way are going to be affected. And trust me, credibility is the most important part, together with window of opportunity and together with the reform, to be at the doorstep of entrance in any of those organizations. And as you've seen, a window of opportunity is presenting to us, and if you are prepared, you can step in. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And without wasting any more time, Dalia, yours the word.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me here, and enjoy every minute to be at the conference. As I started to look at the map, not at the geopolitical map of our region, not from the north, but just really from the south. It's a different perspective. I share the same. View that enlargement is, first of all, EU enlargement as well as NATO, but EU enlargement first, is inevitable for geopolitical reasons. The war against Europe, invasion of Ukraine, put this again the political urgency of enlargement on the agenda among the priorities. So there's no question per se of the enlargement. As I said, EU first in this case. But then comes this magic but, that there's also a lot of concerns within the EU. Concerns about the impact and effect of the enlargement. How much candidate countries are prepared. And whether first to do the reforms, because one idea is to have the reforms, to perfect the governance of the EU as such. That means reforms, agreements reviewed. Just everyone knows the farmers now, green course versus farmers' interest, Ukrainian farmers versus French farmers, payments, etc. So many challenges, concerns. Also the decision-making, veto rights, and then also the fact that in the EU itself, we talk about democracy decline, having in mind Hungary and Slovakia, and luckily now Poland is back on the track. So these are the concerns that should be taken, and the only advice that I could rely on is on the Lithuanian case, on Baltic case, how we accessed EU, not to make a problem. I mean, to make everything possible to build the reputation, deliver, and showing that together contributing to the cause, to the European or NATO cause. Another thing is that public support is matter. Public support, again, in the European Union, and as you know, Eurobarometer 2023 shows that Eastern flank countries between 60 and 70% fully support enlargement, especially eastward, because we have to talk also about the Balkans, but now we look eastward from Brussels' perspective, eastward. But the traditional Paris and Berlin axis, the public societies, only 1/3 supports enlargement. And then we actually don't know how it is translated, interpreted, what is for, when you say yes. Farmers, would they say yes, etc. So this is also perceptions matter. Perceptions matter about knowing, building reputation of the country. I would say now the countries are in much better position than we were 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago, when negotiating, when preparing for the accession, when Baltic states were actually, the good version was that we were in gray zone, nobody knew about us. The bad thing that we were associated with the Soviet regime, with Russia, so it was not corresponding reality. So you started from minus, actually, starting position. Actually, it's usually the question is the time. Time is matter, this momentum. So how long it will take the enlargement? Baltic case, 10 years we negotiated. It takes time. But again, it depends how you view this time. Definitely it's not wasted, as you said, never step back. For the Baltics, I think two factors that made us really built us major capital, tangible capital, was that is collective memory, our approach. We perceived ourselves as always belonging to the West. Even if the West do not register us, we knew that we were coming back. So that's back to Europe, back home. So it helped us to keep the focus, really focus, and it led at macro, meso, and micro levels, in decision making. Another thing was that we stopped being sorry of ourselves. No, the world does not owe anything. History is not just, but it is a merit-based accession. So you have to work. You have to earn. And when you are stop victimizing yourself and sorry, you just concentrate and you plow. In our case, we really worked very hard. But we also understood that the membership of the EU and NATO, or first NATO happened and then EU, it's not the ultimate goal as such. It is just an opportunity to build our state crafting. When we were negotiating the accession, it was Argentina collapsed. It was total crisis. It was really kaput. So it was like a good example that that should not happen to us. Third point that just if would be interested what we are doing now, security, European security order, national defendability or security, sub-alliances in addition to alliance that we absolutely trust and believe, and societal resilience. So,
so thank you very much to all of you for your inspiring remarks. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions from the audience. I already see few of them. We have now half an hour left, so I would like to ask you to be very brief and focused on your questions. Please introduce yourself, and so I think you were the first.
My name is Darchiashvili. I'm International Secretary for UNM, and I'd like to raise a bit provocative question. The first disclaimer that my party, being in the governing party in this country, did a lot. That today we are talking at all about the Georgia's future membership in EU and NATO. But the question is the following. Is it valid to claim that the Western countries make decision on EU enlargement now, giving the prospect to Georgia, for example, as a compensation of inability or indecisiveness or incapacity to make a decision on NATO enlargement? One of the speakers again mentioned, and I raised this question yesterday, that the first was NATO enlargement in Eastern Europe, and then was the EU enlargement. So EU reforms been done under the NATO security umbrella. This was the process. Now we are getting EU membership prospect, and maybe, and I need the answer from you, any of the panelists who can answer that, is it a kind of compensation of inability to make a decision on NATO enlargement? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Who wants to take the answer? Maybe Mr. Korhonen? Your country joined EU first and then NATO, so you did it vice versa.
In my position, you understand, I'm a little bit reluctant to speculate on such questions, but in a way, I mean, we are now living in a little bit different time that we did 15 years ago, and now the importance of Article 5, the commitment to collective defense in the Washington 1949 treaty, it has entirely another importance that it had at that time. So, of course, I mean, member states in NATO, they consider twice before they make such a commitment in such a security environment.
There shouldn't be any type of compensation. There are two different parallel processes, and if you don't look to find, I don't know, the theories behind why that is done one way, just take the process. the members of NATO, and I mean all the NATO members, were not prepared to grant NATO accession to the countries that asked in certain moments, and that's it.
There's no kind of causality. You have to be NATO, then you have to be EU. Really, politics, as you know, you are in politics. It's fluctuating. And geopolitics, it's really very demanding. So it depends really where you want to be and what form this membership is needed.
Okay.
Thank you. Most interesting discussion. Yesterday we had a very depressing presentation by Dr. Sokar suggesting that there would not be any NATO membership for Ukraine. And if I might just give you a personal story, in 1993 I was the Minister of National Defense in Canada, and I was the first woman to be Defense Minister of a NATO country. And my first NATO meeting in the spring of 1993 was with the North Atlantic Cooperation Council, which was the ministers of defense of the NATO countries and the Warsaw Pact countries. And I was sitting next, because of alphabetical order, with the minister of then Czechoslovakia. Across from me was Pavel Grachov from Russia. And we sat there, and what was so extraordinary, and I as a former Soviet specialist felt very uneasy that I was sitting with these people in NATO headquarters, and I thought, I hope they got their filing cabinets locked. But anyway, within a period of time, many of those Warsaw Pact countries were now members of NATO. One of the most important things about NATO membership is, as you've mentioned, interoperability and the opportunity of countries to specialize. For example, I don't know if it's true today, but there was a time when Canada was, for example, an expert in anti-submarine warfare. You would not expect all the countries of NATO to have that expertise. What we've seen with the war in Ukraine are two very important factors. One, that Ukraine has now become expert in the use of all sorts of weapon systems that are only used in war games in NATO at the moment, that have not been used in actual combat. The expertise and practical experience that has come from the Ukrainian experience in this dreadful war is of enormous value to NATO, I think, not mentioning the fact that Ukraine's capacity for arms manufacturing is quite extraordinary in advance, and we've seen this, that NATO countries realize they need to improve that. And secondarily, the war has actually reduced the power of oligarchs in Ukraine, and I think its democratic development and ability to meet the political conditionalities is actually, I think, probably accelerated. So I'd like to know if you share the view that Dr. Sokar presented to us, which I found very discouraging, that there will not be a NATO accession for Ukraine, because it seems to me that NATO, even if it is deeply economically injured by this war, brings enormous resources to NATO in its mission and its commitment to democracy, defense, interoperability, and military sophistication and expertise.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. I share your concern, but I think that Vlad was right to give us this cold shower. But I'm not going to speculate. You know, speculating about the future, and okay, we can have wishful thinking, we can aspire to some type of, but there are scenarios and alternative scenarios, and I would like to share with you an alternative scenario. Trump is president. He has to solve Ukrainian war in 24 hours. He proposed to Putin and to Zelensky, look, Putin, you can keep the other territories, but we won't recognize this. And Zelensky, you are entering in NATO with the territory that you are controlling now. He gets a no from both sides because it's not acceptable for neither of the players. Then he's completely annoyed by that evolution, and we are coming back to square one, which is defending Ukraine, supporting Ukraine, and making the steps that can be till the formal accession of Ukraine in NATO, but actually with all the support. If you look now at the situation of the relationship of NATO countries with Ukraine, and some others for sure, you will see that actually the closeness, even those bilateral agreements that we are signing with Ukraine, granting them support and so on, security agreements and so on, is actually as close as possible to a NATO membership. And I have another point. We will check this out in time. I don't think that we will end the Russian order of aggression in Ukraine without putting boots on the ground. And I'm not to support Macron's form. If I would be an official, it would be an impunity to get that way. But I think that at this point, the situation is such that we would need, at some point in time, to make this step. Thank you.
Somebody else from the panel who wants to answer this question? Or enough pessimism? So, next question. Here.
Urabejanishvili, International Community for Georgia Development and the Progress. I would like to address my question to Mr. Mikheil Darchiashvili. Sir, when and why Russia will invade Georgia again? Thank you.
Tough question. Let's be clear. Russia is conducting a full-scale hybrid war against Georgia as we speak, using internal and external forces, its agents of Russia's influence. What we see more and more attacks on our Western friends and allies. We see and hear more and more initiatives that contradicts to European and democratic values and our foreign policy aspirations. Anti-Western propaganda is in a play full steam. On top of that, we all know 20% of territory of Georgia remains occupied by Russia, and on a weekly basis we have gross human rights violations there. At the same time, influx of Russians in great quantity and their purchase of plots of land, properties, establishments of their businesses in Georgia, to me, represents a very significant foreign policy threat. So, I don't know if Russia decides the military incursion and aggression against Georgia, but one thing is clear, that we are at hybrid war with Russia. Threat is here, threat is imminent, so we need to do everything possible to create all the necessary deterrent to somehow avoid Russia's repeated military aggression. At the same time, we need to cope with hybrid warfare, because we are sliding back. Last year, I was speaking at this same conference, and I was talking that it was before the Vilnius summit. I was complaining that before we were banging at NATO's door, and now we are not even knocking at NATO's door. This year, prior to the summit, we have the similar situation. We are not even knocking at NATO's door, and that's the expert community who are requesting and demanding some tangible deliverables out of the summit. So, yeah, it's a tough question, but the threat is here. We are fighting with Russia on a daily basis with their hybrid war.
So I registered 3 more questions, which I think should be our last ones, looking on the watch. So let's begin here in the middle.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stefanie Fenker, International Institute for Peace. First of all, I would like to say I'm very much pro-enlargement. I've been working on this issue for many years, so this is just what I want to to tell you before I go to my point. I would like to highlight the issue of credibility because I think it is very important because it was also mentioned yesterday that the European Union is losing credibility because we do not really fulfill what we promise. I mean, this is especially true for the Western Balkans. So I think it is very important for us that we stay credible in order then also to have this force and this soft law power which the European Union actually is. So that is just more a comment. The second one is something which I'm not sure if many here know about it. I mean, I'm Austrian, so we are not NATO member, but within the European Union there is this so-called Article 42.7, which is the mutual defense clause. So very interestingly, also, the European Union does have a mutual defense clause which goes beyond Article 5. It's not really so much on the top agenda since most of the countries actually are NATO members and NATO Article 5 normally is triggered first, but I think it is very important also to understand, and this also makes me coming to what the Prime Minister before said, is it's about this interoperability, because if we then talk at one point about European strategic, what do you want to say, the independence, strategic independence, and which we have, strategic autonomy, thank you. This is, which I think is very important for us to know, then this will be more important. And now my question is Article 2. We know that many countries want to become European Union members because it's a lot of perspectives, it's economic benefits, it's all this. But I just would like to remind, and I think it is important, that there is Article 2, which is about the values of the European Union. And they are codified there, and it says that the European Union is founded on its values, which is democracy, it's rule of law, it's minority rights, it's human rights. And I think it is very important that we also understand that all the countries who would like to aspire joining the European Union would actually need to adhere to these values. I think it is very important because it is the basis and it is codified. So what do you think about this, especially when we talk about enlargement? And wouldn't that also shift then, the center from European Union, like more also to the Eastern thing, which is also European Union is diverse. So just your guesses and your takes on that one.
Well, yeah, okay. Thank you for the question, for the comment. Not in European Union, but I would just, I wanted just to say a couple of points on this because it has been a paradigm shift for us, specifically for the defense sector of Moldova, since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. It happened that the European Union acted much faster with specific concrete actions in terms of helping us building defense capacity than NATO, than any other ally. And I know this because I was planning operations when the war started. I know how this help was coming to Moldova, and this was a big paradigm shift because we used every time to think that NATO is the one who offers assistance in terms of defense, other allies, and so on. But in this case, European Union jumped in front, took the initiative, and it still maintains the initiative. So I don't know to what you refer that you disappointed countries, but for us, basically, you were a pleasant surprise, and we basically were very happy to know that we can count on European Union on specific defense issues. And of course, the accession and accepting us as a candidate country to join EU and opening the negotiations as well. So in this respect, I think European Union is flying with the high flag, and we're very thankful for this.
I think I guess it's about Balkans and about 6 Balkan countries that negotiating or having candidate status and still not in the EU. Definitely there's political momentum, and somewhere it was lost, this momentum. On the other hand, Balkans, there's some questions that are absolutely not, or questions that are not answered or solved, actually, issues, Kosovo and Serbia, or even the values that we talk about. Values are not just the words that we think we name them and they are not tangible and we don't feel them, and it seems investment in values, it's a long-term investment that gives extremely tangible results. You get on the same mindset. pattern, on the same platform, you start thinking and making decisions, understanding each other. So it is important. And I would say it's, as I said, the accession is merit, based on merits. So, so it will take time, and it will take time as much as is needed. And values will be one of the parts. Article 5, that's NATO. That's NATO when we, Musketeers clause, when all for one and one for all others. Having said that, as I said, still NATO members, at least on the Baltic Sea coast, this is the Baltic states, fully realize that self-defense preparedness is, first of all, square one for any member country. So you rely on yourself, and this is the major discussion of those who, you can imagine, now what we have discussion, it's not only about the percentage, because we do 2.7, but whether this slogan of delivering 2.7% does not mean already your defendability or security. So you have major discussion on that, and actually a very constructive one, because you talk about how you can help yourself, and at least in our case, we talk about at least 14 days, 2 weeks, to defend yourself on your own within the territory in case of extreme disruption. And the disruption is not only connected. And then, as I said, we talk about building allies. We are privileged. We have Nordic countries, Baltic, Poland. But this is, again, it's the way the mindset sets. We think on the same value-based frequency.
Before Article 5, we have Article 3. And that's one point. The second one, resilience. It's a concept that emerged. You have it on the NATO framework with its specifics, on the EU with its specifics. And to answer the exact point of European defense is 80% investments of states who are not members in the EU.
Thank you. So 2 more questions left, one over there. Maybe we take first and then over there.
Good evening. Zura Beristawi, Georgian diplomat. I have a question to Ilian Kifu. You mentioned the Black Sea security strategy. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this strategy? At what stage are we? And at what extent Georgia and Ukraine, as non-NATO countries, will be included in this strategy? Thank you.
Well, you already have it in the American Congress, a form, and there is another one which is not public on the State Department, which integrates, the whole other things. And you have, I think, the Atlantic Council who published one of the most important. At the same time, a German Ministry of Foreign Affairs is elaborating its own Black Sea strategy, as it is the case for France, who has its own, is developing its own Black Sea strategies. And Black Sea strategy is about the wider Black Sea region, and it includes Georgia, Ukraine, Republic of Moldova as well.
Okay. The answer was very short. That's very fine, because I saw 2 persons asking that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Darchiashvili, Civil Society Foundation. Actually, going ahead with scenarios that Mr. Chifu has been mentioning, I would have such a question. There are all these apocalyptic expectations in the US if Trump comes to power. Would you imagine America really, US really exiting NATO or putting some hurdles to its operations and existence in case of Mr. Trump winning elections?
You're asking me once again to speculate. So I rejected already, and even the scenario was just given to somehow balance the perspective that Vlad Sokor put it, which is very valuable and very valid even today. How should I put it? I'm trusting the American democracy and the balance of power inside the US. Not Trump per se. Maybe Trump inclination to follow its idea and to sign policies and then to see them applied. I think that it's an idea who cannot run very well for the former President Trump. With the rest, well, the future will show us.
Reinhard, if I can complement Julian's comment, I just want to remind you that the United States Senate just 1 year ago enacted the legislation, enacted the legislation prohibiting any president from withdrawing from NATO without consent of the United States Senate. So this is a very rock-solid argument that, yes, that's a very important argument. And I also want to echo, Julian, that I truly believe after working in the United States at Georgian Embassy for 5 years and knowing institutional democracy of the United States, I'm also a true believer in the strengths of the United States institutions, and we've seen this already during the January 6th insurrection, how the democracy won.
Okay, last question.
Thank you. Nino Gelashvili, this microphone is a little bit strange. Nino Gelashvili, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty Georgian Service, journalist. May I ask this question to three of panelists? Mr. Darchiashvili, Professor Bankauskaite, and Ambassador Korhonen, please. The war in Ukraine created window of opportunity for NATO enlargement, but it was for Finland and Sweden. But the door remains open for Ukraine and Georgia. Nobody knows when it becomes a window of opportunity. Until then, Georgia needs to secure its defense capabilities, ability against existing Russian threat, which is just growing, not diminishing at all. And what would be your advice, Ambassador and Professor, to Georgia? What path to follow until the NATO membership? You mentioned about sub-alliances. Is that one way, possible one? And to Mr. Darchiashvili, could you please elaborate more about what could Georgia do before Washington summit, despite all the pessimistic expectations that were mentioned here? Thank you.
When I say, I don't, when I say sub-alliance, I should not like saying, oh, we create some very, we create interoperability and good understanding and tangible interoperability at political and as well as implementary levels among Baltic Sea region countries, and that includes different sectors, including defense. And security is much broader than just defense as military defense. It's a total defense, so different aspects. Yes, we are privileged because we are mentally on the same mentally or mindset is very similar, that we see the threat perception is the same, and we synchronize. So and we share the values. So we know where we want to be. And the key thing is that there's a willpower, political willpower. So having said that, you know that Baltic states call Georgia, Black Sea countries, neighbors, be it north and south. So that's this extension of a very constructive cooperation. it is taking place, and it's really ready to continue. But it's extremely important to formulate what for, and that it's doable. Things are done by doing. So it's very concrete action.
Well, thank you for the question. I'm very hesitant to give advice to other sovereign countries. I can only refer to our own national experience, what has worked for us, and I would just like to mention three things. The first is that for us, especially in difficult situations, the strive for consensus in our political culture and strive for unity, domestic unity, it has been a very important factor during our history. The second point is that it has been mentioned several times that accession process, both in the European Union and NATO, they are merit-based, and nobody can join either organization before really fulfilling the membership criteria. It's our observation, both as members and at one point aspirant countries, that we can't influence very much the environment in which we work, but we can make a choice to strengthen our own capacity to try to fulfill the membership criteria. Finland and Sweden were already technically pretty ready for NATO membership, even when we were partner countries. So this is, and the third point on the Finnish experience is that it must be understood that NATO membership as such was not a solution to Finland's security. The basis is our strong national defense for all contingencies. I'm convinced that NATO membership increases our security, but the basis is our national defense.
Thank you for this important question.
May I just add just one thing, please? That differing from your country's experience, Georgia's and Ukraine's situation is that Ukraine is told that there will be no NATO membership until the war ends, and there is Georgia's occupation status quo. So that makes it very different. Even both countries succeed in all aspects of being interoperable and successful with their reforms. Excuse me and thank you. Yes, Mr. Darchiashvili.
Thank you for the question. What Georgia needs to do before the Washington summit? Diplomatic offensive. First, we need to formulate what Georgia needs from NATO, specifically from the NATO summit. And in my opinion, the best way to create even more engagement of NATO into Georgian affairs and to maintain Georgia's Euro-Atlantic integration, it's the time to reinvigorate this process. And the membership action plan will be the right tool for us to get, because we have all the elements of that. But in order to get the map, we need to have a very strong formulated position from the government. And I remember times when Georgian diplomats were flooding NATO capitals with the specific asks and requests. We were consolidating members. We were building coalitions within NATO member states to advocate on behalf of Georgia. At this stage, it's not happening. Expert communities can do their role. Expert communities can communicate this channel. And also, we need to make sure that our NATO friends realize that if they create a gap in engagement with Georgia, this gap will be used by evil Russia. And we see this at this stage. So that's why it's urgently needed that NATO comes up with a specific tool, specific mechanism. And this tool is a membership action plan that will enhance and further deepen our cooperation with the alliance. At the same time, it will make our NATO membership process irreversible.
Thank you very much. I saw that there are a few more questions, but unfortunately, I have to close this session. Thank you all very much. And I think Eka wanted to say something in some closing words.
I just thought that maybe I have spent a lot of my life in and around NATO, and many of my U.S. colleagues as well in the military and government. And yes, we have a problem in the United States, and it is a serious problem. But there is a infrastructure, there is a large, experienced group of American leaders, policymakers, military, that will not roll easily in the United States if there is a move to take us out of NATO. I really believe that. I wanted to give that perspective. I believe in the end we will hang in there and continue with our role. It may change a little bit, but don't count us out. And I just want to end on this.
Thank you, General. Thank you. I guess I just need to close up the conference. I was looking for Marcel to do that together with him, but cannot see. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, really. It's appreciated. These 2 days full of interesting, insightful discussions. I feel that I'm much smarter now, and I have kind of better ideas coming, which will be implemented until the next conference. And I hope that you will be, with us next year as well. Thank you to moderators, especially German ones, for their being precise. Discussants, participants, partners, NED, FES, and also, as a Finnish honorary consul, I just cannot stop myself not to thank Finnish representation at the conference. This is a tradition. Ambassador Korhonen, also Arkady Moshe, he's not here either, but here, thank you. Really appreciate it. And this all became possible because there are numerous of GFSIS people running back and forth and organizing everything who are not visible, but they are actually, the ones who made this possible. So I would like to thank all of them for that. If you are here, just thank you. Thank you. I'm really proud to have such a team. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Eka Metreveli, for hosting all of us. Thank you. We should applaud Eka because she's responsible for all of that.